After losing 2 full invasion groups in the Sol sector, the Delcuk military insisted on wiping out humanity. If that meant sustaining bombardments into the next century, then that's what they were willing to do, as they were pissed. The elitists on the other side did not want to look weak to the general population. They had already fed the population of their territories a large lie that there was a spatial anomaly akin to a black hole that they didn't see. This anomaly would be what destroyed their second group, and their first group was busy somewhere else. This led to the belief that it would be far too dangerous to attempt a third invasion or even go into the Sol sector. All of this while not even looking like the biggest idiots in the known galaxy to not only get your ass kicked once, but showing up just in time for someone to go, "Here's your ass." The new plan is simple: containment. They would monitor Earth when possible and attack in force if the humans leave their sector. The monitoring would have to be done at random intervals to avoid additional losses of ships that they just couldn't afford anymore. If they had to attack humans leaving the sector, they would disguise it as some sort of training mission, as a live fire training mission. Hint, hint, wink, wink. This plan only calmed the military high command down if the destruction of the stray humans was left to them alone and the elitists would back the hell off. The job of monitoring the humans would be left to their intelligence agents. With this decision, the plan was put in motion, and every dozen solar cycles, the Elites Council would get a briefing on the humans. A very long-winded briefing. The first briefings were actually pretty light. These consisted of numbers of ships, any colonies, stations, and the status of Earth itself, of course. The status of Earth was almost inconsequential, as the spooks couldn't get close enough to Earth without getting shot at by the satellites or the roving ships. The videos and images almost always showed a very large black dot on the planet itself. Given how perfectly round it is, and knowledge of their own tech, of course, they realized what caused such damage. This would be an area that would be watched for recovery efforts. Over time, the Elitist Council actually believed that humanity had stagnated as the dot had not been reclaimed by the planet, or its people for that matter. Each time the spooks passed by Sol, they noticed that the humans are making progress to spread out. Ships of different sizes begin to appear, and in larger numbers, surprisingly. Though of similar design, by looking at it, as every species has their own similar design, it is clear that the style is varied from group to group. This was believed to show difference in classes, yet the different ships all had different symbols, and yet they were of the same size. It was odd. As far as the symbols go, they all had that strange blue-green circle on them. Everyone knew that was going to symbolize Earth. But next to it was also a square with a design on it, or rectangle if you looked at it. Some of them only had a single color, while others had multiple colors, which was very strange. It's believed that these actually designated their status among ships. Also, among the sides were symbols. The spooks say that they're words, yet the translators would constantly show an error message whenever they tried to translate them. It was as though there was multiple languages. They couldn't figure it out. With the loss of a scout ship at the fifth planet's orbit, the intelligence gathering became sparse at best, as they just couldn't get close enough to get any good video or image. Though humans did seem to expand, it's noticed that the more they expand, the slower their rate of expansion. At this current rate of expansion, the elitists believe that the humans will not desire to go further than their seventh planet anyway. Their reasoning was that the human expansion seems to be slowing down exponentially. The numbers simply suggest that any significant expansion beyond their borders will take such a long time that the Docoks put humanity actually out of their collective minds. It's a non-issue now. Besides, they currently had bigger issues. The Dokuks were having trouble keeping the other species in line and under control. The rumor of a pre-FTL species actually resisting their masters had spread for several hundred solar rotations. As they do, rumors turn into legends. Legends turn into myths. Myths turn into inspiration. And inspiration turns into hope. That hope created the rebellions that were beginning to spring up all over captured territory. Most were easy enough to halt, but the delay in production and the loss of materials and personnel was beginning to damage their balance sheets. It was only at this revelation that the elite of the Dokuk began to issue decrees. These decrees turned into orders that were ignored as they never actually dealt with the main issues. Because of that, there were more decrees and laws, and this was like putting more band-aids on an arterial bleed. You're not actually stopping anything. If anything, you're simply building up pressure. At that point, full rebellions became an issue as information leaked out slowly of a species that spat in the face of the Dokoks not once, but twice. Planetary rebellions took a lot of time and resources to quell, especially since the rebelling forces were doing something strange. They were using tactics more advanced than anyone ever expected from those species. In some cases, entire legions of warriors were wiped out or captured. In one case, a full squadron of destroyers and frigates was stolen right under the Dokuk's nose. The ships were able to jump away before anyone even noticed that they had been taken over. Brushfire conflicts with even the weakest of species were erupting faster and faster, and it was only a matter of time before full planets fought back in a way that made even the Dokuks worry. This was their biggest fear, and it happened, and the rebellion was winning. Not wanting to look weak, the elitists ordered more of their own into combat zones, not caring the first little bit about the cost in lives and material. The military High Council was against this at first, but was placated with wealth and gifts. Even with this, the elites would also use bribes, blackmail, threaten them, and even kill to maintain their status. When the world known as Chaos 2 was completely lost, the elites started to actually worry, as this one was kind of close to the core worlds. The world was home to a actually passive species that had become more aggressive over time. These locals were quite tall for any xenospecies. They were also very thin, humanoid-shaped creatures that only had one imposing trait, and that was the horns that grew out of their heads. The natives to this planet's base physiology was actually rather frail, yet they fought off the Dokuk forces stationed on the planet. Realizing that if word gets out that another weak species has fought off their forces that was stationed so close, things could get much worse. In retaliation, the Dokuk military is sent a battle group of one small carrier, 2 battleships, 13 destroyers, 9 frigates, and 8 corvettes hurries into the Chaos system. What they found was not exactly what they expected. They expected the remainder of their forces to be there to greet them. Instead, between the homeworld of these horny aliens and the Dokuk fleet were the stolen ships. The rebel fleet was completely outnumbered and severely outgunned, yet they stood there. The Dokuk fleet ordered their opponents to surrender, yet there was absolutely no response. The Dokuk fleet, realizing that battle was the only option, began to get in formation and line up for a quick slug match as their sensors' alarms suddenly began to go off. All of them. From several different directions, ordnance was coming in. Solid projectiles, chemically projected explosives, and energy beams seemed to come out of the ether, out of nowhere. The Dokuk fleet began to launch countermeasures and point defense cannons blared, but they had no idea where it was all coming from. They realized once it was coming in, but they didn't know where it was actually being launched from. As the battle lines of the Dokuk began to break, the stolen ships charged with all guns blazing. Still trying to defend themselves, only the battleships could actually spare any main gun turrets to engage the rebel ships. They actually didn't get a chance. As the battleships began to adjust their turrets and line up their shots, just as they charged their cannons, the battleships seemed to be targeted, and they were torn apart by weapons being fired from an invisible enemy. As the ships began to tear themselves apart from internal explosions, metal rain started to head down towards the planet. However, this time it was in the form of escape pods. The captains were clearly not full of bullshit and wanted to save their people. As the pods burst from the dying ships, they finally got to see out the windows what the hell was killing them. Against the black of space, they could see dozens of unknown ships, all similar but different styles amongst them. These blocky warships seemed to spit fire from every orifice as they tore the fleet to ribbons. To the survivors' delight, the pods were not actually fired on at all. These ships all seemed to use an aesthetic of industrial chic as they finished off the rest of the Dokuk fleet, and by the time the pods hit the ground, the fleet was no more. When the Dokuk warriors stepped out of the pods, they expected to see enemy Xenos. Well, they did. But they also found themselves facing armored bipeds with ballistic weapons as heavy as the warriors themselves. Through an automated translator on the exosuit, the Dokuk warriors were told to surrender. Not being total morons like their leaders, they complied. Before news of the fleet being lost was even reaching the core worlds, the human fleet dispersed to carry out their assigned missions. Any ship of the Dokuk that was subjugating a planet was ambushed and forced to abandon itself. The human battleships and dreadnoughts spread to hardened targets like space docks and core worlds. They gave no warning as they began to tear into the ships and stations. On every homeworld of captured species, special forces came out of hiding and fought alongside the new allies. The Dokuk could not call in for reinforcements as the ships in orbit had already been destroyed. Human jammers also stopped them from making any communications to be able to rally their forces together. Within only a few of their homeworld's planetary rotations, the elitists were already trying to escape, to run away to save their own asses. But the humans had planned for this too. Using a type of direct fire EMP, they used to disable the elitist personal yachts and allowed these yachts to be boarded. Once on board, the elitists were unceremoniously tossed into escape pods and sent back towards the planet below. All of these personal ships were taken by the humans, as several human frigates actually made their way down through the atmosphere, yet they did not head for the surface. Once they were inside the atmosphere, atmospheric fighters were launched, and every personal ship that was being used to run was immediately destroyed. The atmospheric fighters then targeted the massive docks where the elitists would store their personal yachts, usually used for pleasures. Yet the pleasure this time would be the humans, as laughter was heard over the comms every time they strafed or bombarded every single one of these ships. They beat them so hard that there was absolutely nothing left but molten slag on the ground. The military, for their credit, actually tried to fight back, but were actually forced to use only visual scanning. Not a single human craft, no matter what size, could be seen by their sensors, and this meant most of their advanced tech was absolutely useless. Eventually, the humans collected their fighters and left the homeworld of the Dukuks, returning 7 planetary rotations later. This time, they were not shooting, and they were sent a message: "Don't fire, your own people are here." These cargo haulers actually descended to the ground without any escorts, a true sign of peace. The doors opened, and all the Dokuk survivors that had been captured were immediately released, told to get the hell off their ship. Some were actually so happy to be back because they had been held as prisoners since the initial invasion of Earth. Many of them kissed the ground. Others looked for anybody in their family, just happy to be back. Once all the personnel are off the ships, the human ships simply close up shop and leave, usually at the same time. As they do, the High Council sends a message to the humans. The message was, "Why? Why would you do this to us? Our economy is destroyed. Our ability to traverse the stars is almost completely gone. So many are dead, and you seem to make a point of embarrassing our leaders. Why all this?" It took a while for the message to come back, but a message did come down. "You should be grateful we showed so much restraint and given you a chance to start over instead of listening to a few other voices who wanted to annihilate your entire species. At this moment, you can either follow the same path and personnel that you've always done, or you can begin anew. All things considered, you've been given a very light punishment. You gave our mother a black eye. A simple beatdown like this is the best that you can get. From here on out, we offer you this piece of advice. Don't go looking for trouble, because guess what? You did before, and you found us." Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me on the conclusion of this series. If this series does get enough views and enough interest, I may continue it later, but for right now, this is where it ends. Before I go, I do need to send out a big old thank you to one of my supporters known as Sir. Yes, that's what he goes by, Sir. We actually got a bunch of guys who have Sir, but this one is just Sir, no extra anything on the other end. So thank you, Sir, for supporting the channel. And everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntext, ejecting.